The crystal chandeliers above the Langley ballroom trembled with the weight of 300 whispers. Victoria Langford stood frozen in the center of the floor, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain the entire room could hear it. In her trembling hands rested the small brass telescope she had built herself, her most precious secret, the one thing in this glittering world that still felt truly hers. Then her brother's voice sliced through the music like a whip. £15,000, Lord Elias Langford announced, his smile wide and oily. For the brightest mind in London, my own sister, Miss Victoria Langford. The orchestra faltered. Conversations died. Every fan stopped mid-wave. Victoria's breath caught in her throat. No, this wasn't happening. But Elias kept speaking louder now, drunk on desperation and champagne. Gentlemen, imagine it, a wife who can calculate the movement of stars, who understands mathematics better than half the Royal Society. Baron Silas Crowe. You've been looking for something unique, have you not? The £15,000, and she's yours tonight. A rough hand shoved Victoria forward. She stumbled onto the low marble dais they used for announcements. Her knees nearly buckled. Baron Silas Crowe stepped out of the crowd, thick-necked eyes gleaming with ugly hunger. He raised his glass as if toasting a prize horse. "Sold," he bellowed. Before Victoria could speak, Elias snatched the telescope from her hands. "No, please." Her voice came out, small, broken. He didn't even look at her. With one careless motion, he tossed the delicate instrument to the floor. The sound of it shattering echoed like a gunshot. Brass and glass exploded across the polished marble. Tiny shards glittered cruelly under the candlelight. Victoria stared at the wreckage, her chest caving in. That telescope had taken her 2 years of secret work nights spent by candlelight fingers, blistered dreams poured into every gear and lens. Now it lay in pieces, just like her. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. But her body refused to move, pinned by the weight of 300 pairs of eyes, all of them judging, all of them silent. Except one man. In the shadowed corner of the ballroom where the light barely reached stood Damien Blackthorne, Duke of Blackthorne. He did not smile. He did not applaud. His dark eyes remained fixed on Victoria with an intensity that made the air feel heavier. A faint scar traced down the left side of his jaw, a souvenir from the wars no one dared speak about. His gloved hand tightened around the stem of his untouched champagne glass until the crystal threatened to crack. He had come tonight only to fulfill a social obligation. He had not expected to witness a public execution of a young woman's dignity. Victoria lifted her gaze for the briefest second and met his eyes across the vast room. For one heartbeat, something passed between them, a flash of recognition, of shared understanding, of quiet fury. Then she looked away, cheeks burning with shame. How much was a woman's mind worth in this glittering cage they called society? Apparently, exactly £15,000. And tonight her own brother had named the price. The whispers began again, louder this time. Some ladies hid behind their fans. Some gentlemen chuckled. Baron Crowe was already moving toward her like a wolf, circling wounded prey. Victoria's hands clenched into fists at her sides. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of them. Inside her chest, something fragile and furious began to burn. She was not a telescope to be broken. She was not a debt to be paid. And she would never be a thing to be sold. But as the Baron's heavy footsteps approached, Victoria realized with chilling clarity that no one in this room was going to stop him. No one. Except perhaps the silent Duke watching from the shadows. What happens when the brightest star in the room is treated like the cheapest commodity? 3 days had passed since the night her life was auctioned away like a piece of furniture. Victoria Langford sat alone in the small attic room of Langford Manor, the only place her family had allowed her since the scandal. The door was locked from the outside. A single narrow window looked out toward the cold winter sky. She pressed her forehead against the icy glass. The stars were still there, distant, indifferent, beautiful. but without her telescope they felt impossibly far away. Every scattered shard of brass and glass on that ballroom floor still cut into her memory. She could still hear the sickening crack, still see her brother's careless hand tossing her dream aside as if it were nothing. A soft knock sounded at the door. "Victoria!" Her mother's voice sharp and tired. "Open your heart, child. This is not a punishment. This is survival." The key turned. Lavinia Langford stepped inside, her face pale, but determined, the lines around her mouth deeper than Victoria remembered. "You must accept Baron Crow," her mother said quietly, closing the door behind her. "Your father left us drowning in debt. Elias has made it worse with his gambling. £15,000 will save this family. You will be comfortable. He promised you a generous allowance." Victoria turned slowly from the window. Her hands were cold, comfortable. Her voice cracked. "He looked at me like I was livestock, mother, and Elias. My own brother sold me, in front of everyone." Lavinia's eyes flickered with something that might have been guilt, but she quickly buried it. Men do what they must. Women endure. That is our lot. The words landed like stones in Victoria's chest. Later that evening, her brother came. Lord Elias Langford leaned against the door frame, smelling of brandy and resentment. "If you refuse Crow, I will make sure every door in London closes to you," he said flatly. "No more pretending you're some brilliant scholar. You'll be ruined completely, and this family will fall with you." Victoria stared at him, searching for any trace of the brother who once carried her on his shoulders when she was small. She found none. That night, after they left her alone again, she stood at the narrow window for hours. The winter wind howled softly outside. Her breath fogged the glass. She whispered to the star's voice, barely audible. "I was never meant to be a bargaining chip." Sleep refused to come. Then on the fourth morning, everything shifted. A black carriage bearing the crest of the Duke of Blackthorne rolled up the gravel drive. The household fell into stunned silence. Damien Blackthorne stepped down tall and imposing in his dark greatcoat. The scar along his jaw caught the weak sunlight. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone. Victoria was summoned to the drawing room. She entered with her hands clasped tightly in front of her, heart racing. The Duke stood near the fireplace, his presence filling the room like winter itself, cold, powerful, and strangely magnetic. Lavinia and Elias hovered nearby, eyes wide with sudden hope. Damien's deep voice broke the silence, calm but commanding. "I have come to settle the Langford debts in full," he said, "every last shilling. In exchange, I will purchase the marriage contract from Baron Crow." Elias nearly dropped his glass. Lavinia's hand flew to her throat. Victoria felt the floor tilt beneath her. "But there is a condition." Damien continued, his gaze locking onto hers. Those dark eyes held something she couldn't name. Not pity, not lust, but a quiet, burning intensity that made her breath catch. "You will come to Blackthorne Hall as my assistant. I am working on a secret project, a comprehensive star map that requires precise mathematical calculations. Your mind is what I need, nothing more, nothing less." The room went deathly still. Victoria's mind spun. This man, this Duke who had watched her humiliation from the shadows, was offering her freedom from Baron Crow. But at what cost? She searched his face for deceit and found only steel resolve. Her voice came out hoarse. "Why me?" Damien took one slow step closer. The firelight carved sharp shadows across his features. "Because I saw what they did to you that night," he said quietly. "And I have no interest in a wife who is bought and broken. I want a mind that still burns." Victoria's throat tightened. Part of her wanted to scream yes, anything to escape the nightmare waiting with Baron Crow. Another part, the proud and wounded part, recoiled at the idea of trading one cage for another. She was so tired of being someone else's solution. Her fingers trembled as she remembered the sound of her telescope shattering. Could she trust this cold, scarred Duke who spoke of her mind as if it were something precious? Could she survive if she said no? The silence stretched between them, thick with fear, desperation, and the faintest, most dangerous spark of hope. Outside the window, the winter sky hung heavy and gray, waiting. Victoria drew in a shaky breath. She still didn't know if she was stepping towards salvation or simply another kind of prison. But for the first time in days, someone had looked at her not as a debt to be paid, but as a mind worth protecting. Victoria stood at the edge of the long gravel drive, a single trunk beside her, the winter wind tugging at the edges of her cloak. She had said yes. The word still tasted strange on her tongue, equal parts terror and fragile hope. After 3 sleepless nights of weighing her choices, she had looked Damien Blackthorne in the eyes and accepted his offer. Not because she fully trusted him, but because the alternative was a lifetime with Baron Crow. Now 2 days later she was here. Blackthorne Hall rose before her like a sleeping giant, dark stone walls, tall windows reflecting the gray sky, and an ancient observatory dome barely visible above the east wing. The air smelled of pine and frost. Damien waited for her at the top of the steps, coat collar turned up against the cold. He offered no smile, only a slight nod. "Welcome, Miss Langford." His voice was quiet, almost careful. Inside the grand library that would serve as their workspace, Victoria felt the weight of the room settle around her. Shelves of books climbed 2 stories high. A massive oak table had been cleared and covered with star charts, mathematical instruments, and rolls of parchment. Damien removed his gloves slowly. "You will have complete access to the observatory," he said, "every night, weather permitting. Your calculations will guide the project. I expect precision and honesty." Victoria swallowed. "And what exactly am I helping you map, Your Grace?" For the first time, something flickered across his face, a shadow deep and old. He didn't answer immediately. That first night, they worked in silence under the vast dome of the observatory. The telescope here was enormous, far more powerful than anything she had ever touched. Victoria adjusted the lenses with trembling fingers, her breath visible in the freezing air. Damien stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching the stars as if they owed him answers. Hours passed. Then, without warning, he spoke. "I saw too many men die under those same stars in Spain." His voice was low, rough at the edges. "Every time I look up now, I still hear the cannons." Victoria's hands stilled on the brass instrument. She turned to look at him. The scar on his jaw seemed darker in the moonlight. His shoulders were rigid as though carrying invisible weight. For the first time, the cold Duke didn't feel untouchable. He felt human. Over the following nights, something began to shift between them. Victoria taught him to see the constellations not just as cold calculations, but as stories written in light. She spoke softly about how the same stars that witnessed war had also guided lost sailors home. Damien listened, really listened, his dark eyes never leaving her face. One evening as they worked side by side, he asked a simple question. "Why do you still look at the sky after what your family did to you?" Victoria's throat tightened. Memories of the shattered telescope flashed through her mind. "Because the stars never betrayed me," she whispered. "They never sold me." A long silence followed. Then Damien said, almost too quietly to hear, "Neither will I." The words settled deep in her chest, warm and frightening at the same time. One afternoon, while Damien was away meeting with his steward, a visitor arrived unannounced. Captain Julian Reed, tall, sun-weathered, with kind but serious eyes, was shown into the library. He was an old friend of the Duke from the war. "Miss Langford," he said with a respectful bow, "I came to warn you. Baron Crow has not accepted defeat. He's spreading rumors in London, claiming you bewitched the Duke with forbidden knowledge. He's looking for any way to destroy this arrangement." Victoria's stomach dropped. Before she could respond, another carriage rolled up the drive. Lady Seraphine Hawthorne stepped out, her oldest and dearest friend, now a widow. She had come in secret, risking gossip to see Victoria. In the privacy of the rose parlor, Seraphine took Victoria's hands. "You look different already," she said gently. "There's light in your eyes again. But listen to me, my dear. Do not let fear make your decisions for you. You have a brilliant mind. Don't hide it to please anyone, not even him. Trust yourself first." Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes. For so long she had been told her intelligence was a flaw, a burden, something to be ashamed of. Here under this roof, someone was finally treating it as a gift. That night, as she stood once more beneath the stars with Damien, the tension in her chest began to loosen just a little. She watched him adjust the telescope with careful hands, his movements precise but no longer so cold. When he glanced at her, there was something new in his gaze, something softer, almost wondering. And for the first time since the night of the ball, Victoria didn't feel completely alone. The frozen observatory was slowly thawing, yet deep down she knew the real storm was still coming. The grand ballroom of Blackthorne Hall blazed with hundreds of candles. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across silk gowns and polished boots. Tonight the Duke had invited the most influential members of society to witness the unveiling of his ambitious star map project. Victoria stood near the edge of the room in a deep midnight blue gown, her hands clasped tightly to hide their trembling. She had not wanted this public display, but Damien had insisted it was time the world saw what they had built together. The evening had been going well until the doors swung open with a heavy thud. Baron Silas Crowe strode in his broad face, flushed with triumph. Behind him walked Lord Elias Langford, her own brother, looking pale but determined. The music faltered. Conversations died away. Baron Crowe raised his voice so the entire room could hear. "Your Grace," he called out, "before you present this so-called masterpiece, the Ton deserves to know the truth. Miss Victoria Langford is a fraud. She stole the mathematical calculations for your star map from a gentleman scholar in London and passed them off as her own, all to elevate her position and trap you into this arrangement." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Elias stepped forward, his voice loud and clear. "I confirm it," he said. "As her brother, I know the truth. My sister has always been overly ambitious. She used forbidden knowledge and deception to seduce the Duke's interest. She is not the brilliant mind she pretends to be." The room turned suffocating. Every eye fixed on Victoria like 100 knives. She felt the blood drain from her face. Her stomach twisted violently. For one terrifying moment, she was back in the Langley ballroom, watching her telescope shatter on the marble floor. Whispers exploded around her. Shameful. How dare she? A clever little liar. Victoria's legs threatened to give way. She searched the crowd for her mother. Lavinia stood frozen near the refreshment table, eyes wide with shock and fear. Damien Blackthorne rose slowly from his seat at the head of the room. The scar on his jaw stood out sharply in the candlelight. For a heartbeat, everyone expected him to unleash the full weight of his ducal power and crush the accusation. Instead, he did something no one anticipated. He turned to Victoria. "Miss Langford," he said, his voice calm, yet carrying to every corner of the ballroom, "would you please step forward and present the project yourself? Explain it to them in your own words." The silence became absolute. Victoria's heart slammed against her ribs. Fear clawed up her throat. She could feel every scar from years of being told she was too clever, too strange, too much. Her hands shook as she walked toward the small, raised platform. The short distance felt like miles. She stepped onto the dais. At first her voice came out small and trembling. "The star map. It is not stolen." She swallowed hard, forcing air into her lungs. Then something inside her shifted. She lifted her chin. Every calculation, every coordinate, every careful measurement came from my own work. From nights I spent alone with paper and ink while my family told me a woman's place was silent and obedient. Her voice grew steadier with each word. "I built my first telescope when I was 16. I taught myself spherical trigonometry from borrowed books because no one would teach a girl. The stars never asked me to be smaller. They never told me my mind was dangerous. She gestured toward the large charts displayed behind her, her movements becoming more confident. This map is not deception. It is years of quiet devotion to something greater than myself. And yes, I dreamed it might one day matter. The room remained deathly still. Captain Julian Reed suddenly stepped out from the crowd. "Enough," he said firmly. "Baron Crow paid Lord Elias Langford a substantial sum to stand here tonight and lie. I have the letters to prove it. This is not justice. This is a desperate attempt to destroy a woman whose only crime is being more intelligent than the men who fear her." Gasps turned into murmurs of outrage. Victoria's gaze found her mother in the crowd. Lavinia's face was ashen. With a voice that trembled but did not break, Victoria spoke directly to her. "Mother, I loved you. I tried so hard to save our family, but I will not trade my soul to rescue a house that was willing to sell me like livestock. Not anymore." Tears slipped down Lavinia's cheeks, but she said nothing. The weight of the room shifted. No longer were they looking at Victoria as a scandal. They were looking at a woman who had just refused to stay broken. Damien stood quietly beside the platform, his dark eyes never leaving her face. In that moment, something profound passed between them, respect, admiration, and the first fragile threads of something deeper. Victoria stepped down from the dais, legs unsteady but spine straight. She was no longer the girl whose telescope had been shattered. She had become the woman who refused to let the world define her worth by any number except the one she chose for herself. The night was far from over. But for the first time, Victoria felt the stars above Blackthorne Hall burning brighter than the candles in the room. The days after the ball passed like a slow, quiet dawn. Baron Silas Crow was ruined. Whispers of his bribery and lies spread through London faster than winter wind. Within a week, he had packed his belongings and disappeared from society in disgrace, his name now spoken only with contempt. Lord Elias Langford fared no worse and no better. Stripped of credibility and drowning in fresh debts, he chose exile. The last Victoria heard her brother had sailed for the continent, a broken man carrying the weight of his own choices. But the moment that truly shattered Victoria's heart came from her mother. One gray afternoon at Blackthorne Hall, Lavinia Langford arrived unannounced. She found Victoria alone in the small rose parlor. Without a word, Lavinia sank to her knees on the cold floor, her elegant hands trembling as they reached for her daughters. "Victoria." Her voice cracked, raw and fragile. "I was wrong. So terribly wrong." Tears slipped down Lavinia's cheeks. "I thought I was protecting you, protecting this family, but I turned love into chains. I taught you that your mind was a burden instead of a light. Can you ever forgive me?" Victoria stood frozen, her chest tight with years of buried pain. She remembered every harsh word, every locked door, every time she had been told to be smaller. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then slowly she knelt to, taking her mother's hands in hers. "I forgive you, Mother," she whispered, "but I will never again let anyone define my worth." Lavinia wept openly, resting her forehead against their joined hands. It was not a perfect reconciliation. Some wounds would take years to fully heal, but it was honest. And for the first time, Victoria felt truly seen by the woman who had given birth to her. That same evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Damien found her in the observatory. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her adjust one of the new instruments they had ordered together. When she finally turned, he crossed the room with slow, deliberate steps. "Victoria." His voice was quieter than she had ever heard it. "I no longer wish to honor the old agreement." Her heart stuttered. Fear flickered through her, sharp and familiar. But Damien continued, his dark eyes holding hers with unwavering intensity. I do not want a contractual assistant. I do not want a convenient wife bought with debts and duty. He took one more step closer, close enough that she could see the faint lines of exhaustion and hope etched around his eyes. I want you. Because somewhere between shattered glass and these quiet nights under the stars, you became my fixed point. The one steady light that helped me find my way back from the darkness of war. You are not my salvation, Victoria. You are my constellation. Victoria's breath caught. Tears welled in her eyes as the weight of his words settled deep inside her chest, warm, terrifying, and achingly beautiful. She searched his face for any sign of hesitation and found none. Yes, she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. Yes, Damien. Their wedding was nothing like the grand affairs of the ton. It took place on a clear summer night at Blackthorne Hall beneath a sky so full of stars it felt like the universe itself was bearing witness. No lavish guests, no orchestra, no spectacle. Only Lady Seraphine Hawthorne and Captain Julian Reed stood as witnesses, their quiet smiles full of genuine joy. Victoria wore a simple ivory gown embroidered with tiny silver stars. Damien stood waiting for her under the open dome of the new observatory they had built together, tall, steady, and looking at her as if she were the only star that mattered. When the simple vows were spoken and the ceremony ended, they dismissed even their two friends with gentle thanks. Now it was just the two of them. Hand in hand, they stepped outside onto the wide stone terrace. The night air was cool and sweet with the scent of blooming jasmine. Above them, the Milky Way stretched across the heavens like a river of diamonds. Victoria leaned her head against Damien's shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath. I don't need the old telescope anymore, she said softly, the one they broke that night. Damien's arm tightened around her. No, he murmured. We built something better. A place where brilliant women are celebrated, not punished. Where minds like yours can reach for the stars without fear. He turned her gently to face him, his scarred hand cupping her cheek with infinite tenderness. And I have found the most beautiful constellation of all, not written in the sky, but standing right here beside me. Victoria smiled through happy tears. In that moment, she understood. Her intelligence had never been a curse. It was a gift. A real family was not one that traded its daughters for security, but one built on respect and love. And true love began the moment someone looked at you, all of you, and chose to stay. As they stood together beneath the endless stars, Victoria felt her heart finally settle into its rightful orbit. Safe, seen, and deeply, eternally loved. This story will remind you that a woman's brilliance is never something to be hidden or sold. It is a light meant to shine. That real family heals through honesty and respect, and that the greatest love stories begin when someone sees your true worth and chooses you exactly as you are. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment, and thank you for riding with us today. Aviso legal bar a disclaimer: our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully only to support production, while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.